Welcome to Connecting the Dots on ThinkTech Hawaii. I'm your host, Jay Fidell. This episode is called Why is Trump the Way He Is? Why Donald Trump is so mentally troubled. Our co-host for the show is DeSoto Brown. Welcome to the show, DeSoto.
Thank you for having me, Jay. And as I always say, we have a lot to talk about.
Well, it's obvious there's something wrong with Trump. He's really got a very bizarre personality. If he was a private citizen, maybe he wouldn't care that much. But he's the president of the United States. So we ought to take a close look at him and see what he has been doing, what that tells us, how that informs us about what he is likely to do in the future. Your thoughts?
As you just said, Donald Trump is an extremely complex person mentally. He is mentally troubled. He is mentally disturbed. And the major thing that we have frequently heard about Donald Trump, which has been said openly since he first ran for president, which was back in the his first run started in 2015. And at that time, a number of mental health professionals diagnosed him remotely, mind you, without any actual personal connection or interactions with him, but still nonetheless, his behavior is easily diagnosable as what they frequently are terming malignant narcissism. Now, the word malignant, as all of us know, is usually associated with a bad disease like cancer. So malignant, when you describe cancer, a case of cancer, for example, means usually a very bad prognosis, a very bad situation usually is going to be leading to death. That's not exactly comparable in this case, but it does mean it's a severe situation for Trump. And a narcissist is a person who is consumed with self-love, self-absorption, and a very skewed concept of what their personality is and who they are. And a narcissist really is the center of his or her own world. They don't acknowledge the rest of the world. As far as they're concerned, they are far superior to everybody else. They have the delusion that everybody loves them, everybody looks up to them, everybody admires them, that they're better, that they're more powerful, that they're richer, that they're stronger. Trump also, and he has mentioned this openly, has the delusion that he is very sexually attractive to women because of his looks, purportedly. So all of these things combine to make Donald Trump a person who's very cut off from the rest of humanity, who does not have empathy. He does not understand or care how other people feel. And that's very important. Donald Trump looks down upon other people. Donald Trump doesn't care if he hurts other people. Donald Trump thinks he is in a position to hurt people if necessary, if he decides it's necessary. And he is openly saying that right now in the Iran war, which he started just a short time ago, in which he and one of his flunkies, Pete Hegseth, are bragging about how they're hurting people, how they're destroying people, how they are destroying the country of Iran, and how they will continue to do so. And it makes, because of Donald Trump's narcissism, it makes that whole concept easier for him because he doesn't feel empathy and he doesn't care about others. And so with somebody in the position of being president of the United States, literally the most powerful person on the planet, it's very worrisome that he has that lack of connection and that he does have the power that he has. And Jay, you and I discussed this yesterday in terms of this is a man who could start World War III with the order to use nuclear weapons from what is undoubtedly the largest arsenal of nuclear weapons on the planet. And if Donald Trump, again, because of his uncaring attitude, chose to do that, he could. And that's the thing that's really scary. It's also that Donald Trump has grew up in a situation in which his father was very wealthy. His father accumulated a tremendous amount of wealth. His father was a powerful man, not as powerful as he is, But Donald Trump would have grown up with the idea that this would have bolstered his narcissism to think my family is powerful, my father is powerful, therefore I am powerful. I have all these resources of money and power, and I can do what I want. And that just enabled him to become the very mentally twisted individual that he is today. And so this is why we need to be worried. This is why we need to be concerned. This is why so many people are concerned. And it is this narcissism that's really the foundation of how he acts and why he is dangerous.
People have also talked increasingly about his dementia, whether it's dementia or some related, condition. How how has this changed? It's like a dynamic. He's been with us now for more than 10 years, either in office or trying to get in office. So how does that interact with the narcissism you've been discussing?
People have done long range diagnoses of him, again, without actual interactions. So we have to be cautious about that. But people who are familiar with types of dementia, again, have looked at him and said he probably is undergoing deterioration caused by something they call frontotemporal dementia. Now, there are different types of dementia, and most of us use the term Alzheimer's as being sort of interchangeable with the word dementia, which is not exactly true because Alzheimer's is just one type. Frontotemporal dementia refers to the front part of your brain and how that, in this particular type of dementia, undergoes deterioration. The frontal part of your brain is what controls behavior, and it is what learns what's acceptable and what isn't acceptable in human society. So, as a child, you have none of those attitudes, you have none of that understanding, and you gradually learn that you're not supposed to have tantrums. You gradually learn that you can't get everything that you want exactly when you want it. You gradually learn that there are bad consequences if you misbehave. Now, for all of us, we grew up and we learned those things and we kept those things in our brain. But if Donald Trump is in fact undergoing frontotemporal dementia, in that situation, you gradually shed those inhibitions. You gradually lose the understanding of how social behavior works, and you start to misbehave. That means that you start to insult people more. You don't have a filter on what you say. Most of us have a filter so that we don't go around insulting people and saying hurtful things intentionally to them, even though we may think them. Donald Trump, in addition to his narcissism, in which he feels he can do whatever he wants whenever he wants, is now presumably losing the inhibitions that also keep him from just acting irrationally. And so that is also a reason to be worried. Now, his father, Donald Trump's father, did in fact undergo dementia. His mother may also have undergone it as well. If in fact that's the case, he's almost 80 years old, and if in fact he is suffering from dementia, it would make sense that it would now be manifesting. Now, what we do know from looking at interviews or how Donald Trump had expressed himself 10 years ago compared to now, he clearly has undergone some loss of speech ability. And it also seems likely that he is, again, as I said, losing some of the social inhibitions so that he will insult people even more than he did before. And one of the really obvious examples of this was when he addressed a female reporter who asked him a question on one of his jet flights. And before he answered her, he spoke to her by saying, quote, "quiet piggy." Now that's totally unacceptable behavior, but to Donald Trump, it's perfectly okay, either because of his narcissism or because of the dementia or because it's a combination of both.
You've described, a person who would never be or should never be in power. Um, but he has been in power, and I wonder whether the person you described used those characteristics, those mental conditions to get into power. I recall, for example, when he was acting as a real estate developer or a casino developer back when, he would call the press and pretend to be somebody else and say that he was a terrific fellow. Trump, was a terrific fellow. And that, presumably enhanced his reputation. It enhanced his power. And so I think that there must be a connection between that kind of behavior and and his advancement in real estate, his advancement as a billionaire, and I question that actually, and his advancement in politics. Is there a connection between what we have described so far and his the steps he took to get to be president of the United States?
The reason Donald Trump is where he is because of his father. It's because his father established a real estate empire and he inherited a tremendous amount of money. And he also was able to be in the shadow of a father who amassed a great deal of power purely on the basis of becoming a real estate mogul and being, ruthless and cutthroat in the process of accumulating the wealth that he got through real estate in the area around New York City. So Donald Trump didn't get there on his own. He would like you to think that he did. He has claimed that he did. And as part of his incredible self delusion, one of the things he said many years ago was that he did this all on his own. And he only started out with a small $1 million loan from his father, which he paid back. Now, $1 million loan is not a small amount of money, and it particularly was not a small amount of money 30, 40, 50 years ago, whenever he got started. So again, that to him doesn't indicate that he had a tremendously advantageous upbringing. It's just that it's part of how fabulous he is. It's part of how wonderful he is. So if Donald Trump had not had the accident of birth, becoming the son of this wealthy man, he would never have gotten to where he is, certainly not on his own, because he's not a good businessman, despite the entire aura that he's projected for himself and has created for himself. He's undergone tremendous failures. He's failed in every business pretty much that he's ever tried. He's failed spectacularly, and he's been a crook in doing a bunch of those businesses as well. So had he not had that money to get him started, he might have become powerful through organized crime, which is not impossible that he could have done it that way as well. But he would never, ever have gotten to be president of the United States because he's really incompetent. There are people who started out poor and became president, and it was because they had intelligence, and it's because they managed to get to where they were through hard work, through making connections, through sometimes perhaps underhanded ways, but they got there because they had ability. Donald Trump never had ability, despite his own concept that he did, and he's far better than everybody else. So having gotten to where he is, as I said, based on the foundation of the wealth that his father put together, and then a tremendous amount of self-promotion. And the self-promotion comes naturally to him because he thinks he's so fantastic, as I said, that adulation is deserved. And in New York City, if you've already gotten started with money, you can manipulate media, as he did, to make yourself a celebrity. And he made himself a celebrity. He made himself a celebrity who supposedly was incredibly wealthy based on his intelligence and his ability. You mentioned that he's a, quote, billionaire. We don't actually know what his assets are. We know he has lost tremendous amounts of money. And we know that had he just invested the money that he inherited from his father, he'd actually be richer than he is right now. He lost a tremendous amount of his value through his own ineptitude over that time. But he did gain fame. He did gain notoriety. Now, it's also important to note that as he gained that notoriety in New York City, he was actively disliked. He was hated because of his incompetence and because of his incredible arrogance and conceit, and because he's really pretty ludicrous. The fact that he thought he was a beautiful, he could attract all these beautiful women because he was so attractive, and because he was a man about town, and because he hobnobbed with all these important people. Again, that was a facade that he created for himself, and it pushed him in the direction of then being able to say, I'm so wealthy, I'm so powerful, I'm so notorious, I'm so well known that I'm now going to run for president. We think he didn't really expect to win. And I've read this from other sources. It may have just been a stunt. It may have been something that he just to prove, look how powerful and important I am. I can run for president. Well, he won unexpectedly, and he won the second time, which is also impossible to conceive of. So this all just fell into place through fate. And this man has gotten to be where he is, not because of his intelligence or his ability, but through a variety of uncontrollable or uncontrolled happenstance that has put him here. And again, I emphasize, it's not because he's intelligent. It's not because he's the best guy for the job. It just fell into place. And now we have to deal with it.
Back in the 20s, his father was active in the Ku Klux Klan as it existed in New York City at the time. And we have had so many people describe Trump as a racist against black and brown people, against minorities of all kinds everywhere. And his administration increasingly is filled with people of the same persuasion. What's the connection between this person you're describing and the tremendous racism that we have seen increasingly through his business and his life?
So you mentioned the Klan back in the 1920s. The Ku Klux Klan was very powerful in the United States in the 20s. It had huge numbers of members. There are notoriously famous photographs of a march of Klan members along Pennsylvania Avenue with the White House in the background, and there are hundreds, if not thousands, of them. So it's completely understandable and believable that his father would have been a member of the Klan back in the 20s. Now, the Klan is based upon the concept that white people are the leaders of the world. White Christian people, and specifically Protestant Christian people, are the leaders of the world. The Klan was a manifestation of an idea that had been around for a long time. It goes much farther back than the 1920s. And it's something that was openly spoken about for years, even in centuries earlier, when Europeans had the concept that they were destined to rule over the rest of the world, and they were destined to colonize the rest of the world simply because the color of their skin, the place that they came from, the religion that they followed made them superior to every other person on the planet. So, and again, this in the 1920s is also when Nazism came into existence, and it did not come into power until the following decade of the 30s. But this is also the foundation of Nazism as well. The predestined superiority of white people to rule everybody else and to, if necessary, suppress and be evil to everybody who isn't one of them. So it's also known that Donald Trump's father was very racist in terms of who he would rent to during this pre-war and post-war period in the New York City area. And I have to say, he was not the only person doing it. A lot of other people did it. In fact, it was widespread throughout the United States. But he didn't rent to people who had darker skin, and that was part of something that Donald Trump would have grown up with. So Donald Trump, because of his narcissism and because of his sense of superiority and self-superiority, would definitely go along with those racist ideas that his father had followed, is simply because He thinks of himself as a superior being who has pale skin and pale hair. Makes him better. So, of course, he's going to continue to have those attitudes towards other people. Now, interestingly, there are dark skinned people within his orbit, and Kash Patel is a clear example of that. Although Kash Patel is not African, and I think Trump can sort of break between, well, the people from Africa are in this position, but people from India, maybe they're not quite as bad. Who knows what's going on in his brain? But nonetheless, yes, you are absolutely right. There are people closely within his orbit who we know have those racist beliefs. We know have those beliefs of the superiority of the white race. Now, you and I discussed Stephen Miller yesterday. Stephen Miller is probably Donald Trump's closest advisor. As much of an advisor as anybody can be to Trump, who just does what he wants to do, regardless of what he's told or how he's advised to behave or what he should be doing. He just, on his whim, goes ahead and does what he thinks best because he knows he's the smartest person in the room, in fact, the whole world. But Stephen Miller is a conniving and evil white Christian nationalist. And he is one of the people who has been very influential in the second Trump term in terms of setting basic standards. And one of the things that they've really worked to wipe out is the acknowledgement of how people of darker skin were suppressed and abused in the history of the United States, and how it was necessary to break away from that oppression, and how it was necessary to try to make amends for it in terms of DEI, of having rules so that you cannot automatically just exclude everybody who isn't a white Christian nationalist. Well, the second term of Donald Trump's presidency has been focused on the destruction of the scornfulness that is now thrown at DEI. Oh, a DEI hire, meaning somebody who really isn't good enough, but got hired purely on the basis of their race. And the idea that the white race is being discriminated against, which is preposterous, and Christians are being discriminated against. White Christians are the majority of people in the United States, and they're going to continue to be for a long time. There's no way they're an oppressed minority. They're not a minority. And yet, that's one of the foundations that's going on right now in the second Trump term. Trump is totally in support of that. Trump may not even be giving it that much thought, but if other people tell him that this is what he needs to do, sometimes he'll follow what he's being told to do and say, yes, those poor white Christians are so oppressed. We have to wipe out all those other things that are working to oppress them and bring them back up to the position that they deserve to be at. Well, Stephen Miller is the guy who's putting those thoughts in Donald Trump's brain and getting him to support that.
One of the things that keeps coming up is his demand for loyalty. And that in his first term, he demanded loyalty, but probably not to the same extent that he demands loyalty now. So there's a dynamic going on. The loyalty now must be absolute. It must include everyone who is in federal government, everyone who works for him, everyone everywhere. He wants them to be loyal, and he wants them to have a good opinion of him. And this affects, of course, his view of the First Amendment. Anyone who criticizes him is an enemy, and he will punish that person, or take the platform out from under that person. Look at what he's doing to the media right now. And so, I suggest that there's a connection between the person you've been describing and this whole thing about loyalty. Why does he insist on the loyalty? Why is it so important? And so many things flow out of this demand for loyalty. Why does he have to have that? Increasingly so.
He has to have that because he's a narcissist. He has to have that because he demands adulation, adoration. It's not just that you have to support him, you have to worship him. That's what he wants. He wants no criticism and he wants adoration, like as if he was royalty. And if it was possible for him to demand that everybody who approached him crawled on their hands and knees, he would do it. He would issue that edict. As you approach me on my throne, crawl to me. Show that you are inferior to my superior status. He'd really go along with that. And let me just touch on something else, which I think is closely related to this, too. Donald Trump has been a bully for a good long time. Donald Trump insults people. He intentionally hurts people. He says cruel things to people. He belittles people. He pushes people aside once he's done with them. He throws them under the bus, as the term goes. And Donald Trump is the classic bully in that he strikes first by hurting you, but he can't take it if it gets directed back at him. So he will dish it out, but he can't take it. And that's what is often said of bullies. And that means that if you insult him, if you do not give him total adoration, he will take vengeance in whatever way he can. I suspect that even though he never acknowledges it and even though he covers it up, if you say something to him that hurts him, it does hurt him. I think he's quite fragile, but he covers it up with this facade of toughness. And yet, if something hurts him, he then will either directly take that out on you through some manner in the way that he can through his political power, or he'll have one of his minions do it. He will instruct one of his underlings who, again, adore him and will do anything he can, anything he demands, because they are 100% loyal for whatever delusional reason they have. So that just recently there was the threat that any entity that requires the federal government to issue them a license to allow them to broadcast, if any of these entities were not reporting on the Iran war in a way that Trump accepted and liked, they were put on notice that they may lose their licenses because they must follow what he demands. And again, it's a fragile situation of, if you don't do as I tell you, if you don't adore me without any question, I will take vengeance upon you. And it's all part of the narcissism that he has, and it's all part of his own self-image, as screwy as that self-image is. If it isn't supported 100%, he will take vengeance upon you. And if you are one of his underlings who no longer is adoring him as much as he demands and is no longer useful, again, the lack of empathy means he'll throw you out in the street without a second thought. And we have seen this occur. We've seen this occur with Rudy Giuliani. We've seen this occur with Mike Lindell, the pillow guy. These people threw their lot in with Trump 100%. And once they were no longer useful, he just kicked them out. And these two guys are either bankrupt, facing bankruptcy. They've lost everything by throwing in with Donald Trump and going 100% with Trump. Once he doesn't want you anymore, you don't. And if you're a liability in any way, if you, being associated with Trump, are the target of criticism yourself, he will push you away because that reflects badly on him. So again, without a thought of, well, thanks for all that you did for me. Thank you for bankrupting yourself, but I'm done with you. I don't care about you. You're dead as far as I'm concerned. Don't come crying to me for help. I'm not going to give you any of the billions of dollars that I claim I have just because you're bankrupt and on the street. Tough luck. I don't need you anymore. You aren't kissing up to me anymore. And if you're not kissing up to me, and if I consider you a liability, Goodbye.
People have called him the leader of a cult. He's a cult figure, and he acts that way, and people follow him as if they are members of the cult. His base is actually a cult, and they're still there at 30% or more. And so, and at the same time, they're acting against their own self-interest. It's like suicidal cultism, just like Jonestown. It's the same thing. And he encourages it, and he does things to the country that are very damaging, incredibly damaging. And for example, knocking off healthcare. Really, you want to do that? Knocking off, you know, the prices in the market. And we won't get into the question of how he lies. That's another issue. But it strikes me that he is calling for the whole country to be so loyal to him and so cultish to him, that they would actually do seppuku for him, and that's part of this kind of national loyalty that he is demanding. It is the ultimate in not caring about anybody. Not care. You expect the president to care about the country, but we see all these indications that he doesn't care, and that even the people who follow him, who are most likely the ones who are hurt by these machinations, these destructive uh, policies that he's adopted. How does that fit with being a president? How does that fit with his background as you describe it? It's like it's counterintuitive. You'd think that he would want to, stroke them, and encourage loyalty, do things that will make them more loyal. But instead, in fact, it's just the opposite. What is going on?
A cult has got to have two elements. It's got to have a cult leader, and it's got to have cultists. And cultists are no longer in their right mind. Cultists believe everything their cult leader tells them, even if clearly they see that it's not true, even if clearly right in front of them it's clear that it's a lie. They will deny everything just to be in the shadow of the figure they adore. And if you're an outsider, if you're not part of the cult, it's incomprehensible. If you're within the cult, it is your whole world. And for Donald Trump to be able to just as simply, just as one simple element, to be able to produce clothing that the cult members will willingly wear to show off their cult status, to create the red baseball cap with the brim, with the words "Make America Great Again" on the front of it, and millions of people will willingly purchase it and wear it just to show their cult status. Again, it doesn't even make any sense, and yet people are doing it. So Trump, as the narcissist, as the person in desperate need of constant adulation and adoration, will say or do anything, and the people are now firmly in the cult. They'll adore him regardless. They will cheer for him. They will throw themselves on the ground for him. And one of the things that we saw in his first term was that he constantly was going out on the road as, quote, campaigning or holding rallies, which were purely based on him getting all the adoration and the cult members getting the thrill of being physically close to the man that they worship. So it was this interconnected energy exchange that both sides absolutely required for their existence.
Well, this takes me to the looming 800-pound question, and that is, he's beat up on Venezuela for reasons not at all clear. He's shot fast boats out of the water for reasons that are not entirely clear. He's trying to destroy Cuba for reasons that are not entirely clear. He goes after Canada and Mexico and Panama and Greenland for reasons that are not entirely clear. We'll get to Iran in a minute. And he's going after NATO, and I think that's in the same ball of wax. So what what the characteristics you describe? What's the connection between this narcissism and trying to take over all these places? Even when he said America first and sold himself on this kind of populism and nationalism, uh, through two elections, three elections. Um, so what is it with him that he has this confusion about being America first, America, only serving the cult at the same time, now reaching out and trying to dominate all these places in the world?
Why do people who swallowed the "Make America Great Again, America First" line now willingly, happily troop in the absolutely opposite direction and say whatever our leader says must be true? So they're a lost cause. We'll just go ahead and say that. The problem with Trump is not only his narcissism and not only his potential dementia, but basically, again, he is a child. He is a toddler who has tantrums. He is someone who gets his feelings hurt and wants to hurt somebody else in retribution. The man is an uncontrolled nut, and he is surrounded by sycophants who absolutely will worship him and say, whatever you do, master, is fabulous. Whatever you choose to do, we will support 100%. So any crazy idea that comes into his mind, he just acts on. And once he started his second term, again with the backing of Stephen Miller and that whole cult, he just began to issue edicts, decrees, and declarations that he signed that simply ordered this is going to happen. This is an executive order. I am the president. I am the king. I am the imperial master. And I decree that from now on, everybody's going to do this. And I decree that from now on, nobody's going to do this. It's like other insane countries where there is a supreme leader who decrees that, for example, every man must have a beard. And there are such places. There have been such situations in which men must stop shaving their faces because the leader said that every man must have a beard. Well, it's that type of craziness that's going on in the United States now, not to that degree, but it is that situation. So again, Trump just gets ideas in his head, and he is supported enough and given enough backing that if he says, I don't like Venezuela, I'm going to blow him up and abduct the president and put him in jail in the United States. And tragically, there are enough people in the government who say, yes, we'll do what you demand, master. So this is the situation we're in. Illogical whims come into the brain of Donald Trump, and he acts on them, and people carry out his wishes. So whether it's the narcissism, whether it's the dementia, whether it's whatever, this is the situation that we are in right now. And that's what's scary. Because the other thing is, and you mentioned this a little bit ago, you would think, and normally a president would be concerned for the good of the people of the country. And certainly that's been true of other presidents in the past. They've wanted things to be better because, again, they have empathy. They want people to be in a good place. Donald Trump has no empathy, so he doesn't care. But Donald Trump is, again, such a nut that he would destroy things simply to take vengeance, and then to be able to say, I am ruling over this wasteland. I'm still the supreme leader of this wasteland of destroyed cities and the entire United States. And I decided that that was the way it was going to be. And therefore, I'm still the supreme leader. Whether all of you are dead and suffering, I don't care. As long as I'm still in power and I'm the boss, that's the only thing that matters.
Yeah, and it's obvious that his policies are, in fact, wrecking the country. And, we are going to feel that more and more as time goes by. And it's very troubling that, policy after policy after policy seems to be dedicated to wrecking the country. But let me go to the big 800-pound issue, and that is Iran. Okay? So Venezuela was like a rehearsal for Iran. Here's a guy who had bone spurs and evaded the draft back in Vietnam times, and that was very fishy. But he has some kind of fascination with the military, and he brings in 800 senior officers from all over the world so he can, you know, uh, confirm his control over them. Yeah, and then shortly thereafter, we have Iran, where he is commanding them to go blow up Iran. Now, there are those people that feel that, like a broken clock is right twice a day, and there's good reason to go after Iran. But the fact is that it is a thoughtless attack, and it is resulting in the destruction of our relationships with a number of countries, a number of former allies in the Gulf, in the Middle East, and for that matter, Europe. And it is creating a world economic crisis with the Strait of Hormuz. And this was just not on his radar. He wasn't thinking of it. All he was thinking with his, very, very special um, uh, the Secretary of Defense or War or whatever that is now. Um, God, unbelievable. So here's a guy who has the ability to blow the world up, and arguably he's blowing up the Middle East and beyond right now. So again, I ask you, what is the connection between the individual that you've been describing, that we've been discussing, and the dilemma that Trump finds himself in Iran, which frankly is not going well.
Donald Trump, as you pointed out, never was in the military. Donald Trump was scornful of the military during the Vietnam War. Donald Trump was proud to not be in the military, to have evaded the draft, bragged about evading the draft. And yet, Donald Trump adores the military because it is a symbol of power, and Donald Trump wants and loves power. So if Donald Trump has the military under him, he loves it. They're great as long as they do his bidding. Donald Trump, again, has no empathy for the suffering of what the low-level soldiers in the infantry, for example, would be going through were they to be put into Iran, which they probably are going to be. He doesn't care if people are injured. He doesn't care if they are killed. He doesn't care about the suffering or the grief that families and close people go through when someone is killed in a war. That doesn't even register. Donald Trump has been quoted by people saying people in the military are suckers and losers. So that's how he feels. He only cares about the trappings of power. So, for example, he staged the military parade for himself in Washington, D.C., which is something he had dreamed of doing in his first term, but then was able to do later on because this glorified him. Look at all these tanks. Look at all these people marching past me. They're all paying homage to me, the supreme leader. That's what he thinks about. So for him, I think it's purely an exercise of power. He thinks, again, in his demented mind, well, I don't like that country. I don't like that leader. That person may have insulted me or something. I don't know. But I have the power to declare that they will be attacked just because I can do it. The Iran war was never thought out. The Iran war was not had no basis. There was no reason for it to occur, except that probably Israel said, hey, we're going to attack. You guys got to back us up. Okay, we'll help you out. That's probably what instigated the attack that created the war. And I will say that has caused fracturing within MAGA. Marjorie Taylor Greene being a prime example of that, in which some of the cult members are saying, wait a minute, you told us America first. You told us no wars. You extolled yourself as the president of peace who has ended wars, stopped wars. Of course, it's all lies. Well, for him to then immediately do a 180 and say, yes, I'm the president of peace, but I've just started a war. There are some people who've been shocked into coming into control of their senses to break out of the cult based on that dramatic, unsupportable, crazy shift that he went through. But again, to get back to this, he just does it because he can. He thinks, I can crush you, and I'll just show you that I can crush you because I'm a bully and I don't care about you. And so, just like you were an ant on the table that's right next to me, I could squish you with my finger. I, Donald Trump, have that same power, but I have the entire United States military at my whim, and I can order them to do it. So I'm going to, just so you know how powerful I am.
How does that connect with his apparent love affair with Putin, and for that matter, Xi Jinping and Kim Jong Un and Viktor Orban?
It connects because he wishes he was a dictator as strong as they are. He wants to associate with other dictators who are autocrats, who are tyrants, who have that power. He has power, but he doesn't have as much power as he wishes he could have. And he looks at them and wishes he could do the same things that they do. So he wants to buddy up as a fellow power mad tyrant, but he also realizes that he's never going to be as much of a tyrant as they are, and he's envious and he's jealous, but he still wants to associate with them. And he also, I'm sure, sees himself as part of that club, or he wants to be part of that club. This is a group of men who have what he wishes he had. So he wants to be, again, this is an insecure man who covers it all up with bullying, but he still wants to be with the tough guys. He wants to be with the bullies on the playground like he was a little kid. And one of the ways you maybe avoid being a victim of a bully is to be a bully yourself or to hang out with the other bullies. He doesn't feel that he's going to be a victim of them, but he still wants to be like them. And he wants to relate to them as, hey, we're all the strong guys, aren't we? We're all the tough guys. I'm one of you. You're just like me. Therefore, let's all be friends. And again, this is something that American presidents are supposed to avoid. American presidents are supposed to be a leader by and of the people, not suppressing the people. And yet Donald Trump's desire is to suppress the American people, just like these other guys do to their people, because he loves it.
I suggest to you that he sees himself in a competition with them, and wants to do, be more powerful than any of them or all of them. He wants to be the most powerful, and by the way, through corruption, the most wealthy individual in the world. And so that takes me to my last question. So we have this really regrettable war going on, for which there doesn't seem to be an off-ramp for him, and which is going to have tremendous destructive effect on global economies, including the United States. We will see, even in the span of a few weeks, we will see just how much of a disaster it is on the U.S., on the price of gas and everything else, because of the lack of gasoline here in this country. And at the same time, here's a guy who we have to admit that he controls the military. They will listen to him, and a guy who has his finger on the button, and the people around him who might be able to say no in better times won't be able to say no. So when he threatens nuclear attacks, you really have to worry, even more so than Putin, because Putin is a strategic person, and Putin has thought it out, and Putin does it for his own very strategic reasons. But Trump, it seems to me, is more capable of an irrational nuclear attack than anyone. Now, if he finds in the next few weeks that he can't win this war, that it is going really badly for him, that the Middle East is decompensating all around. He's losing his friend. Europe today said they would not help him in defending the Strait of Hormuz. He has no friends left. He's alienated everyone. And it's predictable that they would say no to him. So here he is alone and increasingly desperate because he's worried about his reputation. He's worried about the midterms. He's worried about looking powerful in the face of the midterms. He's worried about having a country that is clearly not as powerful as the U.S., a leader that is not as powerful as the U.S., beat him, actually beat him on the world stage in a reality show, the likes of which we have never seen before. And so he will do desperate things in desperate times, take desperate measures. So how dangerous is he? And if he is not all that dangerous right now, if he's still kind of an unserious leader, how unserious is this individual who we've been describing here? How unserious will he become as things get more desperate for him?
I can only hope, based on his past behavior and based on his absolutely glib, heedless lies that he tells constantly, and the 180 flips that he does constantly, that his cult members will accept constantly, that the least horrible ending to the Iran situation is that he just arbitrarily declares, we've won. The United States has won under my leadership. We've achieved everything we wanted to do, and we're pulling out. He could do that. And because he can spin anything, and a certain core group of the American public will go along with whatever he says, it's possible. And that would be the least horrible, that would be the least destructive, that would be the least terrible ending to the situation. That he might just suddenly say, okay, we did everything we were supposed to do. We achieved all our goals. I declare that Iran is defeated and we're pulling out and we're coming home and everything's great. So that could be his fallback position. However, it's also not impossible, as you just said, that it could just continue to escalate out of control. Because again, he is so averse to showing anything that seems weak, that seems powerless, that seems like, oops, I failed. He will never, ever admit that he made a mistake. He will never admit that anything failed. He will simply deny it, turn away from it, and pretend it never happened. And if you insist on saying, but this failed, he just will simply not deal with you, or he'll take vengeance on you because you're a bad guy, because you're criticizing him. So given that that's part of his basic fundamental personality, we could see an escalation. We could see a continuing escalation, just as we've seen before. And Pete Hegseth has not ruled out boots on the ground. Donald Trump has not ruled out boots on the ground. That could mean American troops going into Iran to actually fight on the ground, which will be catastrophic. People are going to get killed. Everybody's going to get killed. It's not just Americans. Iranians are going to be killed, and Iranian civilians are going to be killed. But that, of course, means nothing to him. And again, Donald Trump will not care if that occurs. Donald Trump will just keep sending people into battle because they mean nothing to him. They might as well be ants. He doesn't care. And if that's what happens, and the United States again finds itself in a war, slogging for years, for months, whatever long it takes, because it's a stalemate and nothing is ever going to change, that could be going on. Now, if that happens, that will help to bring down Donald Trump, to make him lose even more of the support, the tenuous amount of support that he currently has. That will help to make him even more disliked, hated, and for people to actively push back against him. And it may make some of the cult members change. And it may make some of the guys in the military say, wait a minute, we can't support this anymore. We're going to have to stop this. So that's a possibility too. The ultimate horror could be, as you mentioned just now, Donald Trump again gets some crazy idea and says, well, I can't get out of this, and it looks really bad for me, and people are abandoning me, and all the people who love me are gradually falling away, and they're starting to push back. So my only option now is to nuke this country. Would he do that? Yes, I think he would. Because again, of his mindset, of his narcissism, of his lack of empathy. He would do it just to show power. He would do it just so that it didn't make him look like he was weak. He could do it. If that happens, I don't think the war would escalate, but it's still an absolute horror to inflict upon anybody or anything anywhere on the planet. And again, that would make him even more hated, but it would make the United States of itself even more hated, even more isolated. It would mean that any friends the USA had would pull away forever, or for a good long time. It would mean that there would be attacks by other people against the United States, terror attacks, to take vengeance for what was done, particularly people in the Middle East. So it would be a horrible situation all the way around. I am hoping, given the three scenarios I just laid out, that what does happen is that Trump does a 180, says we're done, we achieved everything we wanted, now we're coming home, and look at this other thing over here that I can distract you with. And maybe that's the best we can hope for.
You know, he has talked about draining the swamp.
Yeah.
But in fact, you know, DeSoto, he has, in his own way, drained the swamp, and we find out who we really are. We find out that our government has flaws. It has flaws in its respect for the Constitution and the rule of law. It has flaws for its caring of mankind and womankind. It has flaws in its relationships with former allies developed in and after the Second World War. It has flaws. So even if you assume that he finds a way out of this morass in Iran, even if you assume that he loses in the midterms and is impeached, or he or his progeny try to win again in 2028, the country has changed. The swamp has been drained, and what we find left over is not a pretty picture. And so, and we also talk about how Trump has changed things. He's changed things here and everywhere. You got to give him credit for that, for the worse, but he's changed things. So my question to you is a very hard question for an historian: is can we ever get back to where we thought we were? Can we ever achieve the moral city on the hill, a beacon for the world that has given us so much pride and if you will, influence around the world? Or will the next leader, will the next election that follows Trump somehow just give us another Trump?
I think it is very likely, regardless of what happens politically in the near future, that the United States has fallen forever from the position it was in, particularly after World War II. Even at the start, let's say at the start of the 20th century, the United States was already pretty much on top of the world in terms of its economic power, in terms of its military. I mean, there of course were a lot of other factors, but still, by the time of World War I, the USA was a leader, and certainly after World War II, the United States was on top of the world, literally, economically, in terms of its influence all over the world. It was on top. I think that's gone. And I don't think it's going to come back. And even if leaders of the United States in the future approach the rest of the world in great humility and say, please forgive us for what Donald Trump did. I don't know that that's coming back. Economically, the dollar is still the world's currency. If that changes, I think that's the end of the USA as the big guy, as you keep saying, the 800-pound gorilla in the room. If the European Union, for example, is able to position the euro as the world's currency, then that means the United States is done for. I think one small aspect of this collapse or this change, which may seem irrelevant because it's just pop culture, but I think it's a symptom, is how the US film industry of Hollywood and the television industry has lost so much power, has lost so much prestige very quickly, very quickly. The Oscars just occurred. Nobody paid any attention. The Oscars used to be a worldwide thing that people paid attention to. And now nobody cares. So if the United States is losing its pop culture leadership in that respect, I think that is an indicator of a general decline in the United States power. We've already seen that happen economically. We've already seen how the United States auto industry, for example, was the biggest in the entire world. General Motors was the biggest corporation on the planet. That's gone forever. It's kind of a battle between Toyota and Volkswagen to be the biggest automaker in the world, and China is coming up very fast to the point where it will surpass them as well. So it's already happened. The decline is already well underway. Trump has given it a kick into high gear by intentionally alienating, insulting, and pushing friends away. And whether or not the USA is able, again, to, after Trump, in the post-Trump period, to win friends back, it's never going to be what it was. And that's already occurred. And a lot of people in the US are never going to be able to accept that. A lot of people in the United States are going to continue to deny it. No, it hasn't happened. We're still the boss. We're still the best. America, rah, rah, rah. Too late. Donald Trump has just given a push to something that was already happening. So I think it's a done deal. And we're going to have to just deal with the world that we now are going to move into.
That's the risk of allowing a malignant narcissist to become president of the United States. This personality, this profile, the characteristics he has demonstrated, are inconsistent with the leader of the free world, and it shows you that one man, one leader, can change the free world and can change the United States, and is changing, and has changed the United States vis-a-vis the rest of the world. I mean, really, there ought to be some kind of test you have to take before you can run for that office. We probably didn't know enough about it when the country voted for him, not once, but twice. Anyway, we'll have to leave it there. Thanks to our co-host, DeSoto Brown. I'm Jay Fidell, host of Connecting the Dots. The title of this episode has been, Why is Trump the Way He Is? Thanks to our viewers for watching. We'll see you again soon for the next one. Aloha.
Aloha, Jay, and aloha, everybody else.